A piece of Norway the size of Iceland fell into the sea. Think about that for a moment. An entire country collapsing. This wasn't just a geological event. It was an execution. Out in the cold waters of what is now the North Sea, a landmass existed. Geologists call it Doggerland, a vast low-lying plain connecting Britain to mainland Europe. For thousands of years, it was home to Mesolithic hunter-gatherers, a lost world of forests, rivers, and herds of wild animals. You've probably never heard of it. Your history books tend to skip this part. And here's where the story gets unsettling. That collapse, now known as the Storegga Slide, happened over the course of just a few hours. It triggered a tsunami, not a wave, a wall of water. Imagine you're there. It's a late afternoon in what we would call early summer, and you're mending a flint spearhead, the scent of wood smoke from your family's fire drifting on the breeze. The ground doesn't shake. There is no warning, just a strange, low sound from the horizon, a sound your people have never heard before. Then you see it, a line on the water moving faster than a running deer. Computer models based on sediment cores drilled from the seabed estimate the wave height at over 10 meters as it struck the coast of Doggerland. That's a 3-story maid of ocean, moving at nearly the speed of a modern jet. There was nowhere to run. Doggerland was almost entirely flat. The highest point in the entire region was perhaps only a few dozen meters above sea level. For the people living on the coast, the warning time would have been less than an hour. For many, it would have been minutes. An entire civilization, on with its own language, culture, and stories, was erased in a single afternoon. The official story is that this was just a natural disaster, a random act of geology. But some evidence suggests it wasn't so random. For decades, fishermen have been pulling up strange artifacts in their nets from this exact area. Worked bone, flint tools, the skulls of animals, and humans. These are the ghosts of Doggerland. They tell a story the geology alone cannot. But here's the part that keeps scientists awake at night. The Storegga Slide was the second of 3 massive collapses in the same area. The third one hasn't happened yet. The third collapse can wait. Because before you can understand the threat that lies sleeping on the seabed today, you need to walk the land that was stolen by the second. You need to understand Doggerland. Forget the maps you know. 8,200 years ago, the North Sea didn't exist in the way we see it now. In its place was a vast low-lying heartland connecting Britain to Denmark and Germany. This wasn't a barren Ice Age wasteland. This was a thriving world. Imagine standing on a gentle hill, the highest point for 100 kilometers. Below you, sprawling birch and hazel forests give way to reedy marshes. The air is thick with the smell of damp earth, salt, and wood smoke. You can hear the cry of seabirds and the distant bellow of an auroch, a wild bull twice the size of a modern cow. This was the Serengeti of Europe, a land teeming with red deer, wild boar, and elk, its rivers choked with salmon, its coasts rich with seals and fish. And it was home to our ancestors. They were a people of the Mesolithic, the Middle Stone Age. Archaeologists call them the Maglemosian culture. Think about what that means in practice. Your entire life is carried on your back. Your tools are masterpieces of flint, bone, and antler. You track the great herds with the seasons, your family moving through a landscape you know not by maps, but by the shapes of ancient trees and the taste of the water in each stream. They were not primitive. Their harpoons had intricate barbs, perfectly designed to hold a thrashing fish. Their flint arrowheads were napped with a surgeon's precision. They were expert survivors. And for 4,000 years, they prospered here. And how do we know any of this? The official records are silent. History books begin long after Doggerland was gone. Our evidence comes from the people who know this seabed best: fishermen. For over a century, fishing trawlers have been pulling up ghosts in their nets. In 1931, the skipper of a trawler named the Colinda was dredging the Lehman and Ower Bank, 40 kilometers off the English coast. His nets snagged on something heavy. It was a block of peat, ancient compacted swamp soil. And embedded within it was a perfect barbed antler harpoon head, dated to an age when this spot was supposed to be deep under the ocean. This one artifact forced scientists to redraw the map of ancient Europe. Since then, the finds have become a flood. Worked flint tools, the bones of mammoths and lions, and human remains. A fragment of a skull, it dredged up in 2008, belonged to a Neanderthal who lived there 40,000 years ago. Another jawbone belonged to one of the last hunter-gatherers. The seabed is their graveyard. And here's the part that is rarely discussed. For decades, these incredible finds were often dismissed or simply kept by the fishermen as curiosities. There was no coordinated effort to map or understand this lost world until the 21st century. Think of the history we have lost, simply because nobody was looking. So when the Storegga slide happened, this is the world it destroyed. Let's be clear about the scale. The slide displaced 3,000 cubic kilometers of sediment from the Norwegian continental shelf. That's a number so large, it's almost meaningless. So try this instead. It's enough material to bury the entire nation of Scotland under 35 meters of rock and mud. All of it moved in a matter of hours. This generated the tsunami, a 10-meter wall of water that scoured the heart of Doggerland clean. It didn't just flood it, it erased it. But a simple landslide, even a colossal one, doesn't fully explain the violence of the event. Something made the seabed unstable on a scale that is difficult to comprehend. The geology shows the collapse was inevitable. A trigger was pulled. So, what loaded the gun? The answer doesn't lie in stone and mud. It lies in ice. It left behind a geological time bomb. For millennia, the weight of 2-mile-thick glaciers had pressed down on the land masses of the northern hemisphere. As they retreated, the land began to breathe again, to rise. This process, known as isostatic rebound, is not gentle. It causes earthquakes. And it was shaking the Norwegian continental shelf to its core. But that's only half the story. The official reports point to one of these earthquakes as the trigger for the Storegga slide. A simple cause for a catastrophic effect. But the evidence buried on the seafloor tells a far more violent story. A story that is rarely discussed. Beneath 300 meters of water and layers of sediment lie vast, frozen fields of methane hydrates. Think of it as fire ice, a solid, crystalline substance made of gas trapped in water molecules, stable only under immense pressure and extreme cold. You've been standing on a bomb this entire time, and someone just lit the fuse. As the Ice Age ended, the oceans began to warm. Not by much, just a few degrees over centuries. But it was enough. Down in the dark, the fire ice began to thaw. It turned from a solid directly into a gas, creating enormous pockets of high-pressure methane trapped beneath a fragile lid of sediment. The seafloor was, quite literally, inflating. And now, look at the timing. 8,200 years ago, The final ice dam holding back a glacial lake in North America, Lake Agassiz, finally broke. An amount of fresh water larger than all the Great Lakes combined surged into the North Atlantic. This disrupted the ocean currents, triggering a sudden, sharp cold snap across Europe. A paradox, a warming world plunged back into a miniature ice age. For the people of Doggerland, it meant harsher winters, scarcer game. It was a struggle, but the real danger wasn't the cold. It was the change in water pressure on the seabed. The system was already at its breaking point. The geology shows smaller precursor slides had been happening for centuries. The mountain was groaning, it was shedding stone, it was getting ready to fall. And here's the part that is never mentioned in the textbooks. The release of that much methane wouldn't have been silent. It wouldn't just be a landslide, it would be an underwater explosion. The initial earthquake, perhaps a magnitude 7 on the Richter scale, was just the detonator. It ruptured the sediment cap. The trapped gas, now under unimaginable pressure, expanded violently, blowing the mountainside apart. This wasn't a slide, it was a blowout, a geological evisceration. 3,000 cubic kilometers of rock, mud, and gas erupted outwards. Enough material to bury the entire country of Scotland under 35 meters of debris. It moved at over 100 kilometers per hour, a pyroclastic flow made of ocean floor. This is what created the tsunami, not a wave pushed by a simple slide, a shock wave born from an explosion. The models of a simple landslide tsunami don't quite account for the sheer destructive reach of the event. But an explosive release of gas, that changes the equation entirely. It explains the totality of the destruction, the scouring of the seabed, the complete erasure of an entire people. The official narrative is neat, tidy, a natural disaster of rock and water. It omits the fire. It omits the explosion. Why? Perhaps because the story of a simple earthquake is less terrifying. It feels distant, random. But the truth is more unsettling. The evidence dredged up from the seafloor shows that the story of Doggerland's death and the story of its life are one and the same. And here's the dark irony in all of this. The very warming that made Doggerland a paradise, melting the glaciers and opening up the lush hunting grounds, was the exact same warming that thawed the methane bomb on the seafloor. The force that gave them life was the same force that orchestrated their execution. The force that gave them life was the same force that orchestrated their execution, and every execution has a final hour. For the people of Doggerland, it began not with a bang, but with a whisper. Imagine you are there, on the coast, a hunter watching the seabirds circle. The first thing you notice is the sound, a low, persistent hum from far beyond the horizon, a sound the world has never made before. Then the birds fall silent, all of them, at once. And here's where it gets strange. The tide begins to go out, fast, far faster than any tide you have ever seen. The sea simply leaves. Within minutes, a vast expanse of seabed is exposed, a place no human has ever set foot. Fish flap in the sudden air. Shells and strange sea creatures lie revealed. It would have been a moment of wonder, a gift from the gods, perhaps. You might have even taken a few steps out onto the wet sand, curious. A fatal mistake. Because what the sea gives, it is about to take back. The official geological models calculate a travel time of under 60 minutes for the tsunami to cross the Norwegian Sea and strike the heart of Doggerland. There was no warning system, no high ground to run to. There was only that strange, receding water and the growing hum in the air. Think about what that means for a family in their camp by a river mouth. Life is normal. The scent of fish cooking over a fire, the sound of a child laughing, the rhythmic scrape of a flint tool against bone. These are the last moments of their world, and they do not know it. They don't see the wall of water until it is already filling the sky, 10 meters high. That's a 3-story made of ocean, moving at hundreds of kilometers per hour. But it wasn't clean water. It was a churning mass of sand, mud, and debris scoured from the ocean floor. It did not sound like a wave. It sounded like a mountain grinding itself to dust. The impact is absolute. It doesn't just flood, it pulverizes. Birch trees, a meter thick, are snapped like twigs. The very soil built up over millennia is stripped away, leaving only bare rock and gravel. The water doesn't stop at the coast. It surges inland for kilometers, a brutal, unstoppable force, erasing every river, every forest, every camp. Total annihilation. We talk about the event, the geology, the numbers, but we rarely speak of the aftermath for any potential survivor. Imagine clinging to a log in a world of churning brown water. The air is filled with a thick, briny mist. Everything you have ever known is gone. Your family, your tools, the very land itself has vanished beneath the waves. There is no fresh water. There is no food. There is only the cold and the salt and the silence. In sediment cores drilled from the North Sea floor, scientists find a single, distinct layer of chaotic debris. They call it the Storegga Slide Tsunami Deposit. It is a tombstone written in sand and mud, the final silent record of a world's end. This is the part of the story we think is finished. A tragedy sealed by time, 8,200 years in the past. But what if it isn't? The evidence shows the Storegga event was the second of 3 major collapses. The third one is overdue. And the ghosts of Doggerland have left us a warning, because their killer is still out there. And today, it's not just a few thousand hunters in its path. It is our world, our offshore platforms, our subsea data cables, the energy and communication networks that connect our entire civilization. Our subsea data cables. They run directly across the scar left by the Storegga Slide. Think about that for a moment. The Ormen Lange gas field, one of Europe's largest energy projects, sits right at the headwall of that ancient collapse. We are drilling for fuel on the edge of a geological shotgun that has already fired twice. The official reports assure us that the risk of a third collapse is low, that the specific conditions of 8,200 years ago, with the rapid melting of glaciers, cannot be repeated. And here's the part they don't emphasize. The sea floor is still warming, faster now than it did back then. The pockets of methane hydrates are still there, vast fields of frozen gas waiting. The mountain is still sleeping. For a century, fishermen have been pulling up ghosts from the North Sea. A flint arrowhead, a bone harpoon, the fragment of a human jaw. These are not just artifacts, they are messages. Physical proof of a world that vanished in an afternoon, sent to a world that believes itself to be permanent. We have what the people of Doggerland didn't. We have the science. We have the deep-sea sonar that maps the unstable slopes. We have the sediment cores that read the history of past collapses like the rings of a tree. We can hear the groans and shifts of the seabed in real time. We have the warning. But what do we do with it? We build on top of it. We lay our fiber optic cables, the very nervous system of our global society, across the same ground that was scoured clean by a wall of water. It's a strange kind of gamble, A bet against geology, a bet against time itself. The story of Doggerland is not a conclusion. It is a prelude. What the North Sea holds more than just oil and gas. It holds a memory, a powerful, violent memory of what the planet can do when its delicate balances are disturbed. We have spent a century pulling up the remains of their world, their tools, their bones, their final silent testament. It leaves you with one final thought. 8,200 years from now, when the ice has once again retreated and advanced, when the coastlines have been redrawn by forces we can only imagine, what echoes will we have left behind?